Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to The Discerning Gamer. Today I want to talk about Wargame Red Dragon. I love Wargame Red Dragon, I love the Wargame series. They scratch a very particular itch that I have for a large-scale RTS entirely focused on combat with a high degree of authenticity, using modern weapons systems. In that kind of nice Cold War intermediate period between when there's a real high degree of electronic warfare that we see now and World War II, where you've got much more kind of dumb armaments, as it were. Though I love this game, it's very visually appealing, there's loads of depth, it's a great team game. The campaign offerings haven't always been great, but I primarily play it for multiplayer. Though I love this game, what I wanted to talk about is its multiplayer base and why I think it hasn't been more of a success. The Wargame series has always had a problem with player retention and keeping a active and diverse player base to keep the multiplayer fresh and entertaining. Obviously you need that churn, otherwise you're going to end up with a lot of very casual people at one end and a lot of very high ranked people who end up having a kind of stale competitive scene to themselves at the other end. So today I wanted to break down the one key reason I see that this is the case with this game, and two very simple fixes that I think could go a long way to addressing this problem. And maybe they wouldn't be able to address the problem with the game as it is, because it's got very little active marketing and there's no kind of hype around it, but certainly could help other entries into the series, which I hope we'll see at some point. So the key issue that I want to highlight here is accessibility, and this is a word that in the games industry, particularly among very dedicated enthusiast level players, has a bad name. It's synonymous with dumbing down, with making things less deep, lowering the skill ceiling, taking long-term life out of a game to make it a quicker win for a publisher. And that's not at all what I'm talking about here. So accessibility for me is about friction. It's about how much effort and behavior change do I have to go through to get to the point where I understand and can enjoy this game. And I think the problem with Red Dragon and maybe a lot of other niche enthusiast games that I'm into is that level of friction is too high, or there's not enough effort made to alleviate it during the initial player journey. So focusing specifically on the multiplayer side of Wargame, what I want to look at here is probably what I conceive to be the two largest points of friction for getting into this game. The first one is before you've even launched the game itself or launched into a match, and that's deck building. So you can have a deck or army group that you customize and bring into battle in the game, and there are some preset ones. However, it feels to me as though you need to understand how the game plays, to understand how your armies work, you need to go through and create your own deck and customize it, and that's where a lot of the joy in the game is as well. However, that whole experience is incredibly convoluted. There are something ridiculous like over 1,100 units to choose from in the game, and a lot of those cater not to the core play style of I want to play this game with the best units or the most competitive units and just throw down with my friends. A lot of them cater to I want to have a very specific battle that is historically accurate to this era with these units in this theatre. And what that means is a lot of the units are actually inefficient if you just want to jump into a standard multiplayer game. So this leads to players having to trawl through a huge number of units and compare minutiae on quite complicated menus and stats cards to figure out what units they want to go into their army and why they want them there. In the actual footage that I recorded for this video, I was helping a friend of mine to get into the game to start off with, and you'll see he even discussed it and was thankful that I was there to talk him through it because of how potentially colossal the task of understanding how all these units fit together is. When you're building a deck, you have to worry about what kind of guidance system the various missiles in your anti-aircraft and anti-tank teams use. Does your tank have a stabilizer? What level of training are your infantry at? What's the mileage that certain transports can get? What's the road speed? What's the armor thickness at various points? It's overwhelming, particularly when you are open to building a deck that has units that are actually not very efficient and are going to get you creamed in a regular multiplayer game if you bring them along. The good thing about this problem is, though, that it's easy to fix. I mean, first of all, the developers could embed a video tutorial that tells you more about the process of deck building and what you should be considering, and they should keep that up to date. You know, that's not a huge amount of effort for a development studio who are going to go on and try and sell DLC and support their community base and extract more money from that base. So that's minimum effort for me. But also, I would suggest that they put in a filter to the deck building system that presents less options to a player to start off with, so that it just solos out the best well-rounded or competitive units that they can be pretty sure if you put some of these choices in a deck, you've got the freedom to express yourself through the creation of the deck, but they're all good units and you're not going to have to scroll through lists and worry about all the different minutiae that you're dealing with. So that takes a big load of friction out of it, because you can suddenly go from spending half an hour of confusion with no feedback as to whether you're doing the right thing by your deck building. You can go from that to maybe 10 minutes where you feel, oh, this is good, I've made this deck myself and I feel good about that, and they can then be sure that they'll have a more positive experience when they're playing because they're using decent units. So the other key change I would make to help reduce the friction and the learning curve and make Wargame more accessible whilst preserving all the depth that we love about it, it actually happens in game, and it's again an issue of user feedback and actually giving the player useful information, and it focuses primarily on the recon system in the game. So concealment, as with any authentic military game, is a key issue. If you can't be seen, you can't be shot. So within the game, you've got a whole system that revolves around the size of what you're trying to hide, its stealth rating, and the optics of the unit trying to observe it. And this calculation all goes together to basically say what unit can see a hidden unit at what distance, and depending on how well hidden they are or how large the unit is. So say, for example, you're much more likely to see an 18-wheeler truck compared to a 2-man scout sniper team. The problem is there is no communication to the player as to what their units can see. You can be responsible and move reconnaissance units with your forces to give them a better chance of spotting the enemy. You can send forward observer infantry to comb the area before you move your main force through, but there's nothing to tell the player that this area is definitely clear of at least this level of threat. So, for example, if I've got a team of Spetsnaz, scout snipers moving through an area, there should be some way of them telling me there's no way a tank is hiding in that hedgerow, because we can see it. So this leads to situations where you can be planning an attack and feel as if you've covered all the angles, you've got your flank secured, you've observed the path ahead, and as you're attacking, suddenly a force that you did not expect to be there can appear on your flank and pull a key unit out of your formation, which suddenly causes the whole thing to crumble. And it's very frustrating because it's not immediately obvious what mistake you made and how to correct that, because the information about concealment and optics and what could have possibly been there is not communicated to the player. So again, I think it's a relatively easy fix that all the developer has to do is add some level of visual feedback, perhaps a sight disc or line that moves around a selected unit that can be toggled on and off, or maybe it only shows around recon units, and it just goes perhaps a different colour for the different levels of sight or certainty that they have when observing something. So that way you can actually account for these threats and feel like you have some level of control and a fighting chance, rather than feeling as if you've been bushwhacked and you're not sure why. So again, the good news about this, I think, is that it's a relatively minor change. It's not going to require huge amounts of development effort. It's dealing with systems that are already present in the game, and it doesn't require any new art assets, anything like that. This is a problem, I think, that happens with a lot of games targeted at niche or enthusiast level audiences, because the developers can have some level of slack and be sure that the audience is going to take the time or take more time to learn these sort of things. But at the same time, I do feel, while that may be true, I do feel that it closes the door on other prospective players and growing your audience and growing your base, which is obviously something a developer should want to do. So don't get me wrong, Wargame, the franchise, and Red Dragon is a great series, they're great games. I've definitely got my money's worth out of them. I thoroughly enjoy them, and I hope to see more from the franchise, but I hope they will take on board some of these criticisms and think just a little bit deeper about how to make it a smoother and easier experience for more curious or less hardcore players to get in there and become hardcore. And by no means is this a singular flaw of Eugen systems. I see loads of games making similar little mistakes around how they communicate information to players, and I will probably go on to make more videos about it, just because it's an intellectual and design curiosity of mine. So that's all for today on Wargame Red Dragon. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know in the comments down below if you've played Wargame, what you thought about the points that I've made, and anything else that you'd like to see changed in the series. I've been the Discerning Gamer. Until next time.